Welcome back to Zane Customs. In this week's episode, I'm going to be working on the Warden from Minecraft. I started this one off in Forger, which is a sculpting app for the iPad Pro, and just started to block out some shapes. I used a lot of reference photos for this one just because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it at all. I just kind of made it up as I went along, and later on I actually looked up a little bit of fan art to see what other people had done just to give me a little bit more inspiration. But to start off with, I just started off with a basic human body preset, which can be good and can be bad. It's nice because you already have legs and arms, so it's easier to start off with something rather than just a sphere, but it can also throw you off in some ways. Like here, you can see pretty early on I don't have the proportions quite right, and obviously a Warden's not a real thing, so you can tweak the proportions and kind of do whatever you want with it, but you'll see by the end I end up making the arms a lot longer and the legs a lot shorter, just to kind of match the original Minecraft model. And I mentioned this quite a bit, but the amount of time I spend in Forger versus Zbrush really depends. From sculpt to sculpt, it changes a lot. This one, I would have liked to stay in it as long as possible, just because it's easier. It's on the iPad. I don't have to. I can do it anywhere. Whereas my computer, obviously, it's a computer, so it's on a desk. It's in my bedroom, and it's just I have to go there to do it. Whereas the iPad, I could take anywhere with me. But I wasn't able to stick to the iPad very long with this one, just because like I mentioned, I didn't really know where I was going to go with this sculpt. I just kind of started making it up as I went along. And one of the things I did, or one thing I tend to do with a lot of my sculptures, if I don't really know what I'm doing, I like to put it in Zbrush and start posing it, and usually that helps give me a little bit more inspiration for how I want to take the design of a whole sculpt and things like that. And when it comes to reposing the model, it's just so much easier in Zbrush versus Forger. So when I get to a point where I don't really know where I want to go with something, I usually push it over to Zbrush and start to pose it. That usually helps me find my way. One thing though I did struggle with is the Warden walks on two legs from everything we've seen, but I was kind of struggling with the more humanoid look versus animalistic, or kind of a more hunched over, more primal look. And in the end I kind of leaned a little bit more into a more primal look, just because I looked up fan art. And like I said, fan art can be a little bit risky because you don't want to look something up and then just copy someone else's art, even subconsciously. So one thing I did notice is through looking up the fan art is a lot of people take it in the more humanoid look. I mean, still very animalistic because obviously it's not a human, but have it standing up on its hind legs, which is true to the original Minecraft model. But when I saw the Warden and saw the gameplay and just saw how it's so powerful and something that you just want to run away from, I thought it was a little bit more intimidating having it kind of be on all fours. And you'll see later when I push it over to ZBrush, I end up putting them on all fours, and I personally like that better. But that was something that I kind of struggled with going back and forth, because like here, his arms and his torso and everything, obviously his torso's got a hole in it, but his arms, they're elongated and they're not quite human, but he looks a little too human for me. From his waist down, I really like how everything's going there with the weird legs and the giant toenails or whatever you want to call them, and his head. I really like how everything's going that way, but the rest of his body I was kind of struggling with. Looked a little too human to me, so I end up putting him on all fours. But right now I'm just trying to flesh out the sculpt as much as possible. At this point I've already decided I'm going to push it over to ZBrush to be able to finish posing in his hands and all that, but I try to finish as much as I can in Forger. And the first thing I'm doing in ZBrush right here is figuring out his hands. Obviously Minecraft doesn't really show fingers very much, so I kind of got to decide what I wanted to do myself, and I thought 3 fingers looked cool. And you'll see later when I actually start posing him, I have him on his knuckles, so I thought it looked better doing 3 versus 4 or 5 or 6 or anything else. So one thing I'm doing here is when I pull the fingers out, it messed up with a lot of the topology and So I had to go in and thicken up his fingers and then remesh it just to get back to a good base that I could actually sculpt on. Because when you have something like that where you pull out the fingers, it stretches some of the vertices and then it just causes a lot of problems. So I was just fixing that up, and then now I'm in here just sculpting up his fingertips. And I want to do the same thing that I'm doing with his toenails. Again, I'm not sure what we want to consider those, but I want them to have a similar look. And for this whole sculpt, I was kind of going for an overgrown floral look, because like I said, it's hard to tell when you're looking at the Minecraft model, but in I think it's the deep dark is where you'll find this guy in Minecraft. There's a lot of fungus and a lot of weird stuff growing, and so I wanted him to look very similar to that. And when I looked at his actual horns, or whatever you want to call them, it looked like he might have had some flowers or leaves growing off him. So I decided to take that and just run with it. So his fingers, his toenails, and you'll see later on he has some little shoulder armor or whatever, I don't know what you want to call it, some stuff growing out of his shoulders. I tried to make that look like tree bark, or maybe like a thick fingernail type material. I don't know what type of material that is, but I wanted it to look like something natural. But a lot of what I ended up doing with him, with texturing and everything, is try to mirror a lot of plants and stuff like that. And this is the part I was talking about where I was struggling really deciding how I wanted to pose him, because his pose would kind of determine what type of creature I was going for, whether he was going to be upright or more hunched. And I originally was thinking just have him hunched over and one hand on the ground and the other one maybe on the side of a cave wall. And I ended up deciding against that, because if I ever have someone buy one of these sculptures, I'm going to have to print it out, and that would just be a lot of resin. Kind of wasted just building up a cave wall. So I decided to go against that. Then I thought for a while maybe have just a little small rock that he could hand his hand against, and basically everything I was trying, I just really wasn't liking the way it was looking. So in the end, I just end up reposing his arm to be on the ground along with his left arm, and I think that looks a lot better. I was also trying to make his skin not look like reptilian. You know, I didn't want scales, I didn't want anything like that. One thing I did take inspiration from is Komodo dragons. They have a lot of loose skin, and I'm sure there's other lizards out there, but Komodo dragon's just one that I know has a lot of loose skin. And one thing I actually looked up as well is Smog from the Hobbit movies, because underneath his neck he's also got a lot of loose skin flaps. And I didn't end up going that heavy with it, but just seeing like their joints and how the skin folds or scales, whatever Komodo dragons have, how they fold around the joints and things like that. I looked up a lot of reference photos of that to help me with certain with his joints. And I also looked up a lot of photos of gorillas, because at this point I had decided that I wanted them hunched over. And also gorillas are big hulking monsters that have a lot longer arms than they do legs. So I looked up a lot of those just to help me with the poses. I didn't really take anything anatomically to bring to this model, because I didn't want it to look like a gorilla, but I did look up a little bit of that just to help me with posing. So what I'm doing here is just fixing the geometry again. It's just like early on when I pulled the fingers out initially. Same thing basically happens when you're reposing. A lot of the topology gets messed up, so you have to go in and fix it up and thicken up areas and remesh and things like that. So I'm just basically running through that real quick, and then I'm going to get back into sculpting the muscle. And the muscle is one thing I wanted to mention. A lot of it is, like I mentioned, very human. Shoulder muscle, forearms, biceps, all of that. Obviously humans have those things. And I looked up, like I said, gorillas and chimpanzees, because they have longer arms and shorter legs. But they have very similar muscle system to humans. So I didn't end up really doing anything that much different. But I was kind of struggling because I thought the top of him looked a little bit too human. So that's when I decided to add these in. And I was already going to add something, because if you look at the original Warden model, he's all green and blue and different shades of green and blue. But then he's got these tannish, what looks to me like tree bark kind of growing halfway up his arm. And I don't know, I looked up a lot of Wikipedia pages about the Warden, because when I go into these Minecraft sculpts, I like to see what basically the trivia is behind them, or if there's any lore that's added to the game. But the Warden, being a new creature that hasn't actually been added to the game yet, doesn't actually have much information on him, at least what I could find. I don't know if I was looking in the wrong spot, but yeah, I struggled finding information on him, and a lot of times I like to do that because it helps influence the sculpture. For example, when I did the creeper all those months ago, I was kind of struggling with what to make his skin look like, if I wanted to go reptilian or what. But I looked up some trivia and lore on him, and I guess originally they wanted him to have a green texture, so it was supposed to be basically camouflage, so they wanted it to look like leaves. So when I went into texturing the creeper, I had that in mind and tried to make him look like a little bit like leaves. Anyways, basically my point is, I did the same thing with the Warden to see if there's anything that it can give me to help me decide on certain design aspects, but there wasn't much. And looking up a lot of fan art, like I mentioned, there had a similar idea to me, some of them, where it was basically looked like tree bark or something kind of growing out of the side of his arms. So I just decided to run with that, and I'm super happy I did, because I think it makes it look a lot less human, like I mentioned. And obviously it's not human, it's a Warden from Minecraft. It's some creature from deep dark caves. Like, it obviously has a lot of attributes about it that don't look human at all, but his arms and shoulders I was just struggling with, like I said, because I thought they looked too human, and adding these little shoulder spike things I think helped a lot. But arms are always a struggle for me. Whenever I'm sculpting something that I don't want to look too human, I struggle a lot with arms. If you look at his legs, obviously from his knee down, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. It doesn't look human at all. But even his thighs, there's a lot of muscles that aren't real. Like, if you look at an anatomy book, you're gonna recognize right off the bat there's a lot of muscles going on there that aren't real muscles. But it's easier for me to be able to kind of trick my brain into making that look good. I've tried doing things like that, making up muscles and adding them onto arms, and it always just looks weird. And I don't know why that is. Maybe I should have tried to look up some other reference photos of animals, but in the end it ended up looking pretty good. And like I mentioned, I didn't want it to look too human, but the Warden is a little humanoid, so having his arms look a little bit more human works. And then here I'm just adding in, like I mentioned, I wanted to have a lot of leaves and like floral stuff going on, so I added these in, and it looks a little weird right now, but you'll see later on I add some what's supposed to be vines going across his horns to connect all the flowers. I think it made it look a lot better. And then the last thing I wanted to do is I wanted the top of his shoulders up to his neck to look like he had almost like fur, but I wanted it to be like grass or leaves or some sort of plant something. So I just took the same model of the leaves that I used for his horns and added them in and kind of duplicated them across. And then here I went back into the original mesh and it's trying to blend it in because it looked a little stark. And in the end I was really happy with the way this looks. I think his body looked a little plain up top after having those shoulder blades, but adding these in kind of made him look a little bit thicker, and just kind of filled some of the negative space that I thought looked a little weird. And then here I'm just starting to go in and do some texturing. I have an actual flower, leaf, grass kind of like meadowy floor texture that I'm just kind of adding in across his whole body, or at least certain parts of his body. Then adding in some bark texture onto his finger and toenails and the shoulder armor, like I mentioned. And one thing I do want to mention is he's got these ghosts or ghost faces in his stomach, and that was something that I looked at the original Minecraft model a lot and just struggled with it because I didn't know what they were supposed to be. But every piece of fan art I saw had ghost faces, and I don't know if I just wasn't picking up on it or if they mentioned something about how he's got like some sort of lost souls in his stomach, or I don't really know what I was missing there, but everybody else was doing their fan art with these ghost faces in there, so I figured I would do it, and I think it ended up looking pretty good. And now here in the coloring phase, I don't spend a lot of time coloring. I obviously spend more time sculpting and doing that whole process, but there are a few things I want to mention. For example, he doesn't really have any of this tan color on his face, but I thought it looked cooler. Almost made it look like his head, or at least down to his teeth, was a hard material, a little bit more crustacean, or like carapace, which is, you know, possibly what his ribs and everything could be made out of. I just wanted to have a similar look to his shoulders and toenails and things like that. But anyways, that's the finished sculpt. Let me know what you guys think about it. I'm super happy with it. I've mentioned this in past videos, but I've had a lot of projects going on, so I haven't been able to spend enough time sculpting, and this is probably my favorite sculpt I've done in a while. So I'm really happy that I was able to get the time to finish this guy up. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. And as per usual, this guy will be up on my Etsy if you guys are interested in buying him. Everything you guys see me sculpt here, you'll be able to check out on my Etsy if you're interested. Yeah, again, let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything you guys want to see me sculpt in the future. I sculpted the Warden because someone asked me to in the comments, so definitely if you want to see me sculpt something, let me know. Please consider liking, comment, subscribing. Helps me out a ton, and I super appreciate it. But regardless, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video and sticking it through all the way to the end. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.